Good afternoon, everybody. I am Joshua Justice, Gallery Coordinator, and on behalf of Mott Community College's Fine Arts Gallery and the Fine Arts Department, I would like to welcome you all to Art Talk, a series of conversations that feature professional artists, educators, and historians sharing their insight into their creative processes and research. We would like to thank the Ballinger Trust for helping us to make these talks possible. We are incredibly privileged and pleased to have our artist today, Linda Stein, joining us live. Linda's biography will be showing on the screen. You can take a moment to read it, or you can go back and view the recording and take some screenshots to read it later. Linda is an activist, a visual artist, a writer, a lecturer, a performer, and a videographer. For more than 5 decades, her work has dealt with themes of protection and otherness, inspired by her own struggles with misogyny and homophobia. Her nonprofit, Have Art Will Travel, addresses what Stein calls the 4 Bs, inspiring bullies, bullied, and bystanders to become brave upstanders. Please feel free to post any questions in the chat via YouTube, and we will make every effort to address them at the end of the discussion. Welcome, Linda Stein. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh Justice. And I also want to thank Jim Shorter for inviting me here today and for all their good work. I'd also like to thank Anna Marie Ho, Museum Liaison, Rachel Berkenthal, Studio Manager, Henry Galazza, Meredith Baki, and the nonprofit Have Art Will Travel, which aims for courageous kindness in this oh so difficult world. Let me give you an idea of what growing up was like for me. Now we're going back to the 1940s and 1950s. I'm 81 now, so that was more than half century ago, a time much, much different than now. I was this little ball playing kid who beat all the girls and most of the boys in the popular games of the day, which were, I don't know what your games are or were when you were little, but for me it was ping pong, marbles, bowling, yo-yo. I was the district yo-yo champion of my neighborhood and cherished that diamond-studded yo-yo I won. It cost big money in those days, 60 cents. Sports took up most of my non-homework time after elementary school, and playing with girls was rare. Though I did have some good gal pals, and I guess with them I played board games and house, which didn't compare in my mind with box baseball and curveball played on the city streets of New York. Now my story growing up mid-century, we're talking about mid 20th century, wouldn't be complete without my introducing you to my decade older sister. She was so very important to me, a professional model, my own role model. I knew she was very sexy. In fact, I think now it may have been this particular bathing suit she's wearing in this fashion ad photo that was handed down to me when I was about 14. Oh, how I loved that bathing suit. Of course, I had to stuff the bra of the suit with nylon stockings to fill it out. I idolized her and thought she was every bit as beautiful as the prime movie star of the day. Do you know who that was in the 1950s? Marilyn Monroe. It was Marilyn who was flaunted everywhere as the ideal female, the role model for what every girl and woman should want to be. This was the culture, the times in which I was brought up, and it needs to be seen as the backdrop for my life's journey, my resource material, if you will. It was Marilyn and my sister who informed my teenage goals and desires and spurred me on to have my hair with one side forward and one side back, and we called it movie style. It was Marilyn and my sister who represented what I should aspire to as an adult at the midpoint of the 20th century. So with this background, it came as a real surprise to me when I first found myself in bed with a woman. She was 2 decades my senior, a returning Queens College student, and we were both sophomores in an Education 101 class. We played tennis together almost every day after school, even in winter when we drove to a local tennis court, taking from the back of her car a tennis net and a shovel so we could remove the snow from the court. We had sex before I knew what the term homosexual meant. She and I shuddered to think we might actually be homo. In my circle, that term was used only in hushed tones and in jokes. One of them was, "My mother made me a homosexual." "Oh, if I give her the wool, will she make me one too?" We thought that was so very funny. We became extremely worried and decided that she would ask a shrink if what we were doing was that. And we waited anxiously to hear his answer. "No," he said, "don't call it homosexual." For therapeutic reasons, I guess, allowing us to heave this huge sigh of relief and continue our betting each time we met. So you see, I was just so naive in those days. The word lesbian was hardly mentioned, and gay wasn't used much either. There was an enormous amount of stigma. That's the best word to use for it, stigma, attached to the word homosexual. And we heard it was even listed as a mental illness from the Psychiatric Association. Life as sophomores in 1962, compared to today, was like living on another planet. Even with homophobia still around in 2024, so many people are now open to and accepting of non-binary folks. So, fast forward with me now to my finally comprehending, that what we were doing was indeed homosexual, a word I knew only uttered in deep derision. My shame then was visceral and intense. I believed I now joined those who were the most loathed inhabitants on earth. I began recording my feelings with sketches in a diary. I wrote, "I must tell no one. I must hide it from every living person I know. I am totally despicable." Some of these faces I'm drawing look back at me with disdain, even disgust. I have to make sure they can't see me. But no, that's not enough. I don't want even the potential of being seen. Here, my notes on the left top corner confirm that I came out to my sister and brother-in-law on June 20th, 1987, a date I'll never forget. To me, the imaginary face to the right that I drew looked stern and displeased. "I have to leave the eyes out altogether," I wrote. "I must begin just below the eyes." Was I averting the gaze, as we say in today's lingo, the gaze of my own drawings and paintings staring critically back at me? I had to be sure that none of these faces had the means to see me, this me that was so very bad. Obsession took over as I saw profiles everywhere, in clouds, trees, buildings, textures, cracks in the sidewalk. I was impelled to draw and paint myriad profile forms in every configuration. I made notes to myself in these diaries, questioning, what am I doing? Where will my experiments go from here? I don't want to miss any variation that comes to mind. Sometimes my drawings included just parts of the nose, lips, and chin in every form I could think of, until it all morphed into what was an idealized form for me, one that I felt had a certain presence and power, a large, strong, abstracted nose with absolutely the perfect arc and angle in my mind, merging just so with soft, sensual lips, curvilinear chin, and strapping neck, and what became an expansive landscape for the shoulder, which sometimes continued onto another totally abstract canvas, the second part of a diptych. I wanted to project an image of profile and shoulder soaring above a vast swath of land, as huge and all-encompassing as possible. I'm reminded now of how much pain I felt as I struggled with my sexuality. Each of the 28 diaries I've now completed detail the ups and downs of my sexual life and evolving womanhood. My art and writing reflected everything. It showed that I was a budding feminist and activist with a longing to write and record my journey, to let it all hang out on the page in order to relieve my stress. And, it did relieve my stress. It always had the effect of calming my nerves, easing my depression, and helping me feel less lonely and hopeless. It's a bit weird to use that word that's being bandied around a lot. A bit weird rereading these diaries now, so many years later, to see such angst in my life and to see on paper how being a pencil person soothed my anxiety as I modified and perfected in my mind versions of the profile over and over again. I eventually even decided to make a set of guidelines, as you see here. I called them guidelines as if others could see my process and learn how to do this themselves. I was very careful to explain the angle and kind of line I wanted. I wrote, the nose begins with a fast line at a 75 to 80-degree angle. I mean, it was even as specific as that. It starts dark and fades away. The point of the pencil barely touches the paper at the nose's tip. Oh, the sensuality of it all. The curve of the chin begins as dark as possible and then fades in a sweeping movement. These were my rules for making profiles, and I followed them faithfully. That is, until such time as I needed to reach beyond them. I created my profiles in series. They're easy to follow on my website, with titles that included identifiers such as the Profile Sketch series, the Profile Solid series, Profile Writing, Marbleized, Fringed, Compartmentalized, Notation, Letter, the Profile Palette series. And here I would use palette paper itself to form a new profile after mixing colors on it for other paintings in progress. The Profile Daubed series, Profile Landscape, and here's another diptych. And I so enjoyed making one side entirely abstract and the other side conforming to my profile rules. The Profile Flying series. At times, these looked like birds to me flying in the air, but on homing in on this idealized form coming from deep within. When I got to the Profile Envelope series, I unfolded actual envelopes, refolded them, and drew them with profile writing for addresses and squiggly lines or shadings for stamps, until the sculptor in me took over and another series began, which had profile writing in combination with my idea of alphabet letters. In this case, it's made from, can you see in the picture? It's made from coral found on the beach. This construction is called all letters rest on a baseline. Soon bent nails and found objects were replacing profile parts, and shells and small stones were included in what I called missives. I kept to the formal format of a written letter with date at the upper right, salutation as if it were Dear Ms. Jones with comma, indentations for paragraphs, and signature at the end. This kind of work continued for a long time until I was asked by the curator of an exhibition called Bad Girls to make the most outrageous sculpture I could think of. And then I was launched on a new journey with the machete blade as focus. For me, the machete became a symbol of protection and power. I published newspaper and journal articles with the title, My Blades Are My Bodyguards. In some exhibition, the sculptures hung and swayed gently from the ceiling with almost invisible cords. Many viewers didn't notice the machetes until they came up really close. Then, in 2001, after 9/11 and running for an entire day from my ground zero studio and watching the trade towers fall, I realized how much that word protection meant to me throughout my life, and titled my next series, Knights with a K, Knights of Protection, again making an idealized, rather androgynous figure, which sometimes included superheroes and icons of protection, highlighting especially my all-time favorite upstander, Wonder Woman. This series led to another theme I call body swapping, which included sculptural art that could be worn on the body. And now the nonprofit Have Art Will Travel came to the fore, enriching its educational programs to include upstander and courageous kindness. Body swapping was then followed by other series, other stories, but all of these will remain for another discussion at another time in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
One question is, as her living in her truth or something, I am being subconscious of the things she were at a young age. But was it things that she struggled with, trying to put out there or express?
Can you hear that, Linda?
Yeah, if you could talk a little louder, that would be good. Just the last part I didn't hear.
I say, as you was growing subconscious and trying to live in your truth, what is things that you struggle with to put out there or express to people that you may have felt?
I'm not sure I understand what your question is. And maybe because I'm not hearing it as well.
Were there things that you struggled with when living your truth and expressing yourself at a young age?
You mean in my coming to grips with my homosexuality?
Or no, more so like when you expressing yourself in your art, was it like something that you struggle with momentarily, like before you finally embraced it?
Yeah, you're talking about the materials I used in my art?
No, like you express, like for instance, like how you express yourself more so looking down, and it was like you coming to terms with not only like you said with your sexuality, but like did you have? I say, did you have like a struggle to where trying to put that out? Like, did you have like a struggle?
Well, other struggles, that's a good question, actually. Other struggles might be being a woman. And, I feel that men have their own struggles with having to be masculine. I've done artwork that addresses boys growing up? Am I walking like a man? Should I grow a beard? Will that make me look more masculine? And I was so struggling. As you saw in the beginning, I was influenced by Marilyn Monroe and the craze for femininity as it was defined in the 1950s. And as I grew older and 1963, Betty Friedan published her book. And as I read and listened to feminists, I became much more of a person that wanted to bring in not only my sexuality, but my feminism into my work. And that became a goal. It led to a lot of my work being androgynous looking as opposed to just feminine or just masculine. I included both. But I would say that struggle and the theme of protection, which I was obsessed with, really took a lot of my thought, my time, and my efforts when I was making art.
Specifically with your sculptural arts, is there a medium that over time, getting to experiment with so many different pieces, that became your favorite?
I love found objects. I go to garage sales and I buy all kinds of things at garage sales. Mostly wood objects. I like wood best because it's easy for me to handle. I could screw into it. It's relatively light, but I've used every object. I'm looking at some sculpture now, or you see some sculpture behind me. And I think you could see a torso that it's called Sticks and Stones, which has another meaning, but it's made up of sticks and stones. And the piece to the right of it, I don't know, can they see that, Rachel? The piece to the right of Sticks and Stones? You will see it has stone, leather, various metals, pipes, wood, magnesium, brass, copper plates from printing. I use a lot of printing plates. So I would say those are my favorite materials.
I was wondering what your support system was like back in your earlier days when you were like still figuring stuff out and how you think it shaped you.
My support system. What an interesting question. Okay. So since I'm letting it all hang out, I'll tell you the truth. Let's see, I was about 21 years old. I didn't know why I didn't want to marry Elliot, who was promising the world to me. You know, he flew his own plane and you know, what was the matter with me? Why didn't I want to marry Elliot? We would go to grad school at Yale. We would fly there once a week or something like that. I would take grad courses. So I went to therapy thinking it would take 6 weeks to figure out why I didn't want to marry Elliot. And, you know, I said I was naive, but, you know, at that time, I didn't even bring my homosexuality into it. So the answer to your question is that therapy, my therapist, and then group therapy, where I had a whole bunch of people that became my best friends, became my support system. And I still feel very lucky to have had that.
Yeah. Just make sure you speak loud enough. The speaker's right there. Or the microphone's right here.
Is it right here?
Right.
Oh, right here.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, do you think throughout your journey as an artist that they brought you closure? Doing everything that you did, as far as finally embracing your truth, like brought you closure to yourself and to expressing yourself to people.
Yes, very definitely. Not every artist needs to do that to get closer to myself, to get into my own head, to think about and be concerned about what I was thinking about. Not every artist needs to do that. I'm not saying this is the only way or the best way or even a good way, but it was very necessary for me to look within. In fact, I think I titled at least one of my pieces "Look Within." It was very important for me to do that, and I had an inclination to share that with the world. So after hiding as much as I did, so that no one knew I was gay, to use today's term, I then wanted to share my experience, because if there's anyone that could be helped by my experience, that would please me a lot.
Yes, I read that the word courageous derives from Latin, which means to tell the whole of your story with your whole heart. And I was wondering how you got to that point, because to me that's I don't know about other people, but it's a very difficult thing to do. And
To share,
yeah, the process of embracing your
to share what's on your insides with an audience. Is that what you mean?
yes.
You have to have the desire to do that. Everyone is different. You know, my wife is a very private person. She wouldn't do what I'm doing, for $1 million. So it really is depending on, what you feel a need to do. I had that need to do that.
As you do these talks, do you go back, you have a lot of your old work featured through here. Do you go back and kind of pick pieces from your old art and incorporate it into new art, or do you kind of strictly stay, constantly evolving with your new art?
Well, I've given various lectures. They're usually gender bending. One was called The Fluidity of Gender, and there was a traveling exhibition that went to maybe 30 museums. And that was a different set of work. And the one now is Below the Eyes. And so I focus on that. And in this lecture, I kind of gave a sneak preview of what followed. If Below the Eyes was mostly done in the 60s and 70s, I then gave you a little sneak preview of what came in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. I have another series called Holocaust Heroes, Fierce Females. Gender bending, you see, Holocaust heroes. The word hero, you might immediately think of a male. And so I scramble that expectation. So that has a different set of artwork. And that has a traveling show, which is now at the Museum of Biblical Art in Dallas, Texas. But you could see these different themes on lindastein.com and see how I transitioned unintentionally most of the time because I just had to do it, from one series to another series. And also, I just want to say, as you're seeing on the screen right now, you're invited to go to my nonprofit, Have Art Will Travel, and even apply to the Linda Stein Upstander Award, which gives out $3,500 every year. There's also an Upstander comic, which gives out $500, at which you could apply to.
I'm interested in your experiences during the 80s in New York, with it being really the ground zero, the epicenter for the AIDS epidemic. And with like ACT Out and such, and all the shame, but also the activism going around the social and political stigma of AIDS at the time.
Right. So look, I was born in 1943. So in the 80s, in my early 40s. In my early 40s, I had finally, it wasn't until about age 40 that I finally, after dating men and going back to women and dating more men, I decided that no, I was going to be gay. And I think it was a political decision, as I don't mean politics, but it was maybe one would say philosophical decision as much as a sexual decision, because I felt I couldn't fulfill my potential if I played the feminism role that I couldn't get out of my head that I was taught as a child. So I, at that time, really became activist. So in the 80s, I went to marches, I wrote about feminism, I gave interviews, I gave lectures, and I was very supportive of what was being done for AIDS and for gay men in general. Those were the Reagan years, and you might know that Reagan didn't until the very end even use the word AIDS. I mean, so the stigma was just enormous. And I became an activist, and certainly in the 80s, I was becoming more open and accepting my sexuality and marching as much as I could.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
A lot of my work is advocacy and sorry, I lost my word. And basically advocacy for mental health and disability. And my support system asks me a lot, why do I do things that are so sad? And, you know, I find that it makes me happy to put that out there. Have you ever had to deal with something like that? And how do you deal with it?
Okay, let me say that's very interesting what you're saying. So you're saying that being drawn to sketch and paint or sculpt people involved with the disabilities makes you feel better.
Yes,
And
I'm bound.
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wheelchair bound. So yes, to get the word out there, you know, get rid of some of the stigma.
Yes, so
Yeah.
we're in the same, I think we're in the same position in that it makes me feel good to take what has been such a stigma, you know, sexuality and being gay, And, uh, with every lecture, even if it has nothing to do with sexuality, I usually, say that I'm a gay person within 5 minutes of my talk. It's very important to get it out. And it was very important for me to draw, my idea of sexuality. I didn't, there's one print, actually, if you go to prints, I think Marching for Today's Events has a scene I did all the various marches, and one was on ableism, and I was very pleased to include that. And it was pleasing to me to draw about the stigma. So let's call it a stigma. And, there's a lot of bigotry today against people with disabilities. And there, and I struggled with all the bigotry of homosexuality. So I would say to you, good going. Good, please don't be influenced by those that say, why are you drawing sad pictures? You have a need, and this is just my opinion, you have a need to do this. It's, within your DNA, you need to do this. And I could only tell you, for me, it was helpful. And I hope it will be helpful to you. And I'd love to hear more about it. If you want to email me, my email address is on the screen, linda@lindastein.com. I think it takes some bravery, so I commend you for doing it.
Thank you.
So in my own lifetime, I lived down in the Grand Blanc Township area, and we had a gay prom queen or prom king win for homecoming. There was a church down in Tennessee that had come down to protest against it. As a Christian myself, I have had to deal with a lot of people that are misinformed and try to be hateful and use religion as a way to be hateful. Which I have never advocated for. I think, love one as you would want to be loved yourself. But when it comes to your work being published and shared around, as that was being published, did you ever have any religious kickback?
Any religious, what was that last word?
Kickback.
Yes, I've had all kinds of kickback. Yes. And I would say you're brave too, to think as you're thinking now, that yes, I'm a Christian and I have certain values as a Christian. But one of those values is empathy for others. And I think it's wonderful what you're doing. And look, we're going to get kickback and bigotry forever. So we just have to be courageous. And that word protection again comes to my mind, because we need to protect the other, and I think that's what you're doing. So bravo or brava. Good for you.
Anything else you'd like to add, Linda?
No, I guess I'm speaking mostly with students. I would guess, I'm just curious, are you mostly juniors and seniors, or are there some freshmen and sophomores also in the group?
Mostly freshmen and sophomores.
Mostly freshmen and sophomores? I'm sorry. Was there a shout out?
We're a 2-year school, so we are foundations,
Oh,
so
that's right. That's right. You're a community college. I
Right.
forgot. Right. So you're freshmen and sophomores.
Yeah.
Well, I could be reached at my email address if anyone is interested. And please, if you have any inclination to apply for the awards, please do so. And it's been a pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you. Well, that concludes our talk for today. Please join us for our next art talk, which will feature sculptor Daniel Kayatz and painter Sherelle Chillick. That exhibit is currently on display in the gallery until the 25th, and the art talk will take place on October 24th. Visit gallery.mcc.edu to find the information and for the link to that. I want to thank Mott's Media Services for all their hard work in putting this together. I want to thank Anna Marie and Rachel for their help on Linda's end, and a big special thank you for Linda for taking the time out today to speak with us.
My pleasure.
Well, thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.